What's up, guys? It's Denise Salcedo. Welcome back to the channel. With me right now is former ECW champion, former NWA World's champion, and one of the best minds in wrestling, Raven. Raven, thank you so much for taking this interview with me.
You're welcome.
So I want to start off with, it's been 25 years since the Raven character. How did you sort of brainstorm this character and plan it out? I wanted to do something that reflected my personality. And it's a long, laborious story, but suffice to say that in the short version is that I figured that the misfits, the tortured souls, the people that didn't fit in, those were my people, and I wanted to have a look that I felt comfortable wearing that also represented that. And it was also what I dressed. I mean, I dressed in ripped up jeans and ripped up concert shirts and a leather jacket, put a flannel around my waist. And then I was trying to come up with a name. And so I was watching, I'd seen the movie The Crow, and I'm thinking, what was the name of the character now? And I go, Eric Draven, Raven, quote the Raven, nevermore. And it just came to me like that. I mean, just kind of divine inspiration, really. Did you ever pitch the character to Vince McMahon?
No, I didn't. I knew it wouldn't make a difference because he would only see me as how he'd seen me before, because the perception is reality. So they saw me as a comical character, which I would have. I like being a chicken shit heel, but nobody was buying that. So I had to become a tough guy and change my character. And but I didn't want to be one of those guys that just beats up everybody. Like that gets boring. So I wanted to be tougher by taking more of a beating, by just continuing to get up. But I knew if I pitched it to Vince, then he would just, even if he liked it, he would have just put me as I would have been an enhancement guy then, or a low level guy, because that's what he saw me as. And so I knew if I wanted to go back, I'd have to leave to come back, which I did leave. And then when I did come back, there's a lot of animosity there.
Right. So what were Paul Heyman's initial thoughts when he first heard of the character?
He thought, like, it ties right into what I'm saying. He thought it was going to be a comedy version of what Raven is, because he just assumed, because I'd always done a comedy-esque character or had comedy, a chicken shit heel character, that's what he was getting. But as soon as he saw it, it totally vibed with him. And bookers always have a person in the company who they see themselves through that person's eyes. Like Vince sees himself as Lex Luger, the Patriot, also sees himself as the $1 Million Man, and that's how he sees the world, through those eyes. And Paulie saw the world through Dreamer and my eyes, so it worked out great, So he really understood my character, maybe even more than I did at first, before I'd really, because it was new to me, and I think he understood it at first more than I did, until eventually, obviously I know it better than anybody, but at first it was a great boon to have him know that, to have him see that.
So, speaking of that, what are your thoughts when it comes to how important is it for a guy to come up with his own character, his own gimmick, instead of having somebody else come up with it?
Well, if you're a booker and you see a guy on an indie scene and you're like, I like that guy, he's got talent, but I got to figure out something to do with him. But if you see a guy who's fully developed, who's got a character and a point of view, you can go, oh, I can fit that in this story. And so it's much easier to cast somebody if they already are the part, than to try and make somebody into a part. And you've seen that, some results have worked out, and a lot of them have, bombed miserably.
Were there ever any character ideas that you pitched to Paul that maybe he kind of just didn't run with, or anything like that?
I'm sure there were. I don't remember them. If I was really committed to something, like the Blue Meanie, when I came up with the idea of the Blue Meanie, they were so against the idea when they heard it. And I said, look, just give me one opportunity to debut them, and if you don't like them, you don't use them again. And so they indulged me like they mostly did, and then it turned out to be a great character.
Well, speaking of that, did you ever think that Bubba and Dvon would eventually become this, recognizable, in the industry, like this huge?
Yes and no. They were like Dudley 8 and 9 or 7 and 9, I think, or something. They weren't even the original Dudleys. There was Dudley, the original, but they had a flyman from Florida, and they couldn't, it's too expensive, so they wanted somebody local. Then we had Snot Dudley from California. He was a fly-in, so he got put by the wayside because of travel budget. Big Dick Dudley was from there, I think from the start, or right off the get-go. And he was a New Yorker, so he stayed. Then we had Dances with Dudley, Dvon, Spike, Bubba. We had Chubby Dudley. It's funny that they weren't even close to the original Dudleys, but they ran with it and they were the best at it.
That's awesome. So now let's go ahead and switch gears because I do want to talk about some current topics in wrestling as well and get your thoughts on it. So let's start off with AEW. Right now, everybody's talking about AEW, WWE, Wednesday Night Wars, all of that. So when it comes to that, it almost took 20 years for there to be a viable competition against WWE. Why do you think it took so long?
Because executives didn't see wrestling as a moneymaker. The ad ratings, the ad dollars are much lower for wrestling than it is for everything else. And so I just think that I know for a fact executives just didn't see wrestling as a money-making commodity after WCW went out of business. And so it just took till somebody decided, with enough money to invest in it and who had connections.
Do you think that it's hard if AEW wants to be an alternative to WWE? Do you think it's hard based on the fact that they have to attract casual fans and not just rely on their hardcore fan base? Do you think that that's possible?
I think they have from what I understand, they have a totally different fan base. The pay-per-view, the fan base that buys the pay-per-views that buy AEW don't buy the other pay-per-views and vice versa. So I think they've accomplished that. Just the fact that the Cody and the Young Bucks were able to sell that kind of merchandise at Hot Topic right away. As soon as I heard they were selling stuff in Hot Topic and selling out, I knew there was something big was happening. Because that's Hot Topic deals with national products, and they weren't a national commodity. They were Japanese wrestlers, Japan wrestlers, and so I knew there was something big there. So it was just a matter of time at that point.
And based on what you've seen, what's something that has stood out to you that you like, or some things that need improvement with AEW?
No, I really like the show. I think it's a really good show. I think Cody's a hell of a boss, and I think they're going places.
Nice. So we were talking earlier about being the number 2 promotion, but for a long time, that number 2 promotion was Impact Wrestling, TNA. What do you think it is that sort of led to their downfall?
Bad booking. The same thing that leads to the downfall of every company. Bad booking, bad characters. And if you have good characters and bad booking, you're still going to eventually lead to your downfall. But you can have bad characters and good booking and you'll survive. You can have bad booking and you won't survive whether the characters are good or not. You got to have the right storytelling. Because you're trying to... If you're going to keep somebody's attention for 2-3 hours every single week, and not just 22 weeks like a TV show, but 52 weeks, of the year, because there's no off season in wrestling, you have to have a clever, creative storytelling.
And speaking of creative storytelling, Tessa Blanchard, Sami Callihan, we just have Tessa Blanchard just became the first ever Impact World Champion. I want to know what your thoughts are, not just on that accomplishment, but also your thoughts on intergender matches.
I'm not a fan of intergender matches for the simple fact that it looks like spousal abuse. I think there's a problem, and I'm not saying that the women aren't as good as men. I'm not saying they can't be better than men, but I'm just saying that I think the size difference and the fact that men beating on women, it has a bad look. It's just a bad look, especially in the Me Too movement era. It's not a good look. But then again, I think Impact is being strategic with this because they want to do something different to set themselves apart. And I'll reserve judgment until I've actually seen it, which I haven't. So I can't say. All I'm going by is my initial gut reaction, but I haven't watched it. I don't watch the current product, except AEW I watch. But I haven't seen any of Impact lately, and so... I don't know. I could give you a 30-minute discourse, but I don't want to. I don't want to, just preach about something I really don't know well enough.
So also, speaking of the fact that you watch AEW, so there's AEW, there's Impact, there's WWE, there's so much going on. There's so much wrestling content right now. Do you think that it is too much? Do you think it's maybe oversaturated?
Oh, of course. It's always oversaturated because, I'm sure if WWE really, if it was up to them, they would go 2 hours, one show a week, and now that's all, or maybe 2 shows a week, and that's it. But they had the third hour put into Raw because you can't turn down the money. How do you turn it down? So it's ridiculous not to. And then they didn't have to, but they decided to go with NXT against AEW because it's competition. Competition's good, but they want to be number one and only, and they want there to be no number 2. So they had to make that. So now you have extra shows. Then you also have MLW, you have Impact. So if you're a wrestling fan, if you're a super wrestling fan, it's a smorgasbord. But if you're a casual fan, it's a lot to digest, But I think the more discerning your tastes are, you'll zero in on a product you like, hopefully, and stay with it, as opposed to just going, it's too much and throwing the towel. But you don't know. I really don't know at this point.
Time to pick and choose for everyone. So I also want to know your thoughts in terms when it comes to social media. How do you think social media has impacted the world of pro wrestling and the industry, better and for worse?
I think people listen too much to the internet. The people that, if you're a sports fan, okay, the people that write on the message boards and all that, they are such a small minority. Like, what are you a fan of? What, besides wrestling, what are you a fan of?
Pop culture, music, TV.
Okay, music. Do you go on web? Now, are you a big music fan?
Yes, I'm a big Taylor Swift fan.
You're a big Taylor Swift fan, but do you go on websites and write stuff on her fan pages and chat rooms?
I do not, unless it's a comment, a positive comment.
But that's my point. My point is so if you're listening to people that go there, they're the 1% of the 1% of the 1%, and you're listening to such a small minority, and that's always been a problem. The people, the boys and the bookers have listened to the internet for so long, and they still don't realize that you can take that as something to add to your knowledge base, but to go by that as the gospel, you're catering to such a small audience that's going to tune in anyway. So you don't even have to worry about them because they're going to tune in no matter what, So it's very bad in many ways, and also for people who nowadays I did some stupid ass shit when I was younger, which nobody will ever know about unless I tell them, which I have no problem telling people because I'm an open book. But most people, you want your younger life protected. But now with the internet, everybody's life is on display from day one, and they feel like they have to. It also gives people a sense of FOMO, fear of missing out. Yeah, I think it's really become a trap. Yeah, to be honest, if I didn't, I barely post. I don't go on Facebook, but what I post on Twitter goes on Facebook. I don't go on Instagram, and the only reason I even tweet, and that's very little, is because just to keep my fan base, just to keep something active. But if I retire completely, I'm not going to go on any of that. I mean, it doesn't do me any. It's more of an inconvenience than anything.
It's very easy to get sucked into that bubble and just get very invested in what people are writing. And sometimes it can really affect your mental state. But let's go ahead and talk about one of the topics that everybody was talking about is the fact that now Paul Heyman is running creative, secondhand to Vince McMahon. What are your thoughts on that for Raw, specifically for Raw?
I don't follow the current product really too much. I mean, I started watching AEW because it was different, and I like Cody. I'm a friend of Cody's, and but really, I don't watch the product, I mean, I kind of keep abreast of it, what goes on, but obviously not that deeply, or I would have known that. But I have somebody send me the random information that happens once a week, and then I just read it over, and that's it. And the only reason I even do that is just because it's still my business, and I still want to have an idea what's going on, but I don't follow it closely. I don't want to know what's going on that deeply. It doesn't. I have too many other interests to occupy my time than to spend, hours. It's something that for 30 years I devoted my life to, and it's time to move on.
It's interesting because my last question to you was actually going to be, as having this great mind, I thought that maybe going back into creative was something that you might be interested in. So is that out completely for the future for you?
That's a different subject, because that I'd like to pass on my knowledge. So like when I go on the road, I do a lot of seminars, and teach psychology to young guys. Yeah, I definitely am talking to some people about creative, but it's from a different perspective. It's because I want to teach and give back more so than it is I want to be involved, if that makes sense. I mean, I don't want to not be involved, but I don't have a need to be involved is what I'm saying. I don't have I've walked away, I've walked away for years now. I've walked away numerous times in the business. I don't need the business, but I'd like to give back to the business, because it gave so much to me.
Well said. I love that, Raven. Thank you so much for taking the time not only to talk to me, but also give your insight on all of this. It was a pleasure talking to you today. Guy, do you want to share anything that you want to plug, or social media, or any upcoming events or anything like that?
Sure. At The Raven Effect is my handle for Twitter, so that's about it. And my podcast is The Raven Effect Podcast. I mean, that's really, that's about it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, guys. If you like this interview, make sure to give it a like. Do not forget to subscribe to the channel for more, and we'll see you later.